I met this guy I'm really into, but I think he might be possessed. Written by Let's Split Up. Just as a general rule, I have terrible luck with men. Maybe it's my habit of going for brooding bad boys. All my relationships start great, but as soon as that fluttery infatuation wears off, they always turn out to be raging assholes. Not this guy, though. At least, not yet. And I know I shouldn't give him my whole heart. He's a supposedly reformed scam artist who, when I ask if I can trust him, just laughs at me. But when you've always been that perfect good girl who always raises her hand and can recite every rule, there's something intoxicating about a rebel. He took me to this big bash after I admitted I finished college without ever really partying. Amidst the music and the babble and the bonfire, he asked me to dance. But I demurred. All I could think of was back when this boy I dated in high school told me I looked like a duck when I dance. And he was like, "Girl, you want to see cringe?" Showed me photos of himself at age 23. "See that faux hawk?" I laughed because it was terrible. And he was like, "Yeah, but I wore that thing like a rooster. Just be you and don't let other people ruin your night. Dance badly and with all your heart." And then he dragged me into the music and out of my shell. First college party, first time getting high, first kiss with a girl. Who knew goody two-shoes Emma had such a wild child in her? Though it turned out my kiss was pretty chaste in comparison to when I challenged him to do the same. I never knew how hot two guys making out could be. Oh my God, there was so much tongue. And when I told him I didn't know he was bi, he grinned and said, "I'm not, just exceptionally slutty." Right then, I knew I was in for a roller coaster. But what really drew me to him wasn't the wildness. It was how underneath he had these soft, dark eyes that hid some deep pain. God, why do I always go for broken men who need fixing? What I didn't expect was that his inner demons would turn out to be so literal. It happened later that night. After he'd made love to me multiple times and we lay tangled in the sheets, I fell asleep with him spooning me. But I woke up alone, the other side of the bed cold. I patted the mattress and sat up, looking around, and then a man stood in the corner. My heart raced, then settled as I realized it was him. But something was wrong. He stood there, swaying slightly, and whispering, giggling. I called his name and his head jerked.
"Not here,"
he growled.
6,922. He's where you go when you sleep. 6,921.
An ice pick of fear stabbed into my spine. Goosebumps rose all along my arms. Then a moment later, the low, growling whisper stopped. Suddenly the bed shifted as he climbed back in and slid his arms around me. I was too scared to move, but in moments he was snoring. In the morning, he laughed it off as sleepwalking. The next time it happened, we were out hiking, passing this abandoned radio tower up on the hill surrounded by skeletal trees. As I gazed up, I mentioned how, as a kid, every time I saw one of these towers reaching up into the sky, I always dreamed of climbing it. Next thing I knew, he was tossing his bag over the fence exclaiming, "Let's go." I sputtered objections. The sign said, "You don't have to be the teacher's pet out here, Emma. The only rules are in your head. Come on, live your life." But it was dangerous. Illegal. I paced back and forth outside the fence. Inside me, that little girl who used to tattle on anybody who cheated screamed at the top of her lungs that the sign said, "Do not enter." I was wired to obey, to behave. I wrung my hands while he grinned at me from behind the fence. And finally, I climbed over and joined him at the base of the tower where he craned his neck and whistled. What a long way. Ladies first. The rungs. They were biting cold. Neither of us had gloves. No proper climbing equipment. We hadn't told anybody we were out here. This was astronomically foolish. But he kept urging. And not wanting him to think me a total wet blanket, I finally forced myself to set my boots on the rungs. My arms shook. The metal resounded hollowly against my grip. Those first 24 rungs were the scariest. My heart pounding as I got higher, and the wind whipped my hair. I looked back at the ground below us. "Oh, wow," I said. A rush of exhilaration filled me, because if it felt like this now, what would it be like on top of the whole world? I was about to find out. The distance itself was nothing once the adrenaline kicked in, powering me right up those rungs. Just me and the trees. I'd made it above the tree line, and the wind tugging like it wanted to tear me right off. I whooped and laughed at my incredible height. "Oh my God, this is amazing." And I looked back down, only to be surprised at how very far below me my guy was. "Hey," I called. "Jack, you okay?" I'm not great with heights," he called up. "What? Then why are we up here?" "For you, babe. For your dream. You got this." I hadn't realized I'd be climbing this tower by myself. The encouraging shouts from below soon became too distant to hear, but I kept climbing, and then I'd made it to the platform. The vista of trees and hills spread out before me, the sky in the distance deepening to twilight as the first stars appeared above clouds feathered pink and purple, almost close enough to touch. I took out my phone and snapped some pics, even knowing nothing could convey the splendor of that breathtaking panorama. I don't know how long I stayed there, at the top of the world. If nothing else, I'll always be grateful to him for teaching me to break out of the cage set by my own mind. When I finally descended, I was halfway down the ladder when motion below caught my eye, and my heart leapt into my throat. Because my man, he was no longer on the ladder. No, he had climbed off of it and walked onto one of the support beams. No handholds, nothing. Just balancing high above the earth, lurching along the tower's edge on a metal support beam he could topple off if he lost balance, or if a strong gust of wind hit him. He was oddly swaying, and worry swept over me. "Hey," I called out. "Hey, what are you doing?" No response. Was he suicidal? Planning to jump? Oh, Christ. I rapidly descended, only to gasp when I climbed below the tree line and found myself face to face with him through the metal bars. He was on the opposite side of the ladder now, and he jerked me close and pressed his body against mine through the rungs and kissed me. Hot but precarious. Maybe hot because it was so precarious. Then he said, "I got great pics of you. Also, the police are here to arrest you." What? Yeah, dropped everything and drove out here as soon as they heard some girl was out in the middle of the woods trespassing on this abandoned tower. I smacked his arm. "What were you doing climbing onto the beam anyway? You could have fallen." He blinked, dark eyes, and cocked his head like a spaniel. Said he'd retreated before he'd made it even a third of the way and been down below, taking pictures of me, until just now when he climbed back up. But that didn't make any sense. I'd definitely seen him on the beam. But the most terrifying incident was at a restaurant. It was the first time a date had ever taken me to a vegan candlelit dinner. Do you know how tough it is to be vegan when your boyfriend goes on and on about how much he loves meat and will suffer through a veg-friendly restaurant only if you go with him to a steakhouse next time? My ex had convinced me that was fair. When I told my new guy how much I appreciated that he made sure every place we went had more for me than just salad, he grinned and said, "Babe, the bar's so low I could trip over it." Yeah, I guess I was pretty dumb in my dating choices in retrospect. I looked down at my napkin. "Hey," he squeezed my hand. "Emma, you're not dumb for getting stuck in shitty dating dynamics. That's just social conditioning." He kissed my hand and I blushed. Maybe it was the wine, but it felt like his eyes were just drinking in the sight of me. Like I was the sun and he was the planet I shined on. But every planet spins half in shadow. I wasn't at all ready for the terrifying darkness of his orbit. When I came back from a trip to the restroom, our booth was empty. A tingle crept along the nape of my neck as I peered across the dim candlelit dining room, and a whisper drifted up from somewhere.
Hee hee, 3,897. Hee hee.
I peered down under the table, and there he was, hunched with his back to me and his hands over his face. Ice poured down my spine. Hey, he came skittering out so fast I screamed. Heads turned and people exclaimed as he burst out, vanishing back behind the bar. Nobody had time to react beyond gasps, murmurs, hushed voices. Snatching up my phone, I approached the bar, only for a shadow to dart up and over the counter like a roach and scuttle along the floor to vanish down the stairwell to the restrooms on the lower level. I descended the stairs, my hands shaking as I held my phone and hit record. I found him standing in the darkest corner, twitching. This time he did not run when I got close. Finally, I whispered, "Jack?" The twitching stopped. The low, growling voice said,
He's not here. 3,731.
Emma? Okay. I lowered the phone, trembling, and showed him the video. How about you tell me what the fuck's going on? It was called the Counting Bogey. It had infected a 9-year-old boy who'd gotten it from another child at the playground, who'd gotten it from an imaginary friend. The count always started at a random number. When it reached 0, the bogey would clip the connection between your body and your soul and wear you like a suit, running around in you and leaving your soul a wandering ghost. Supposedly, it had once been a child, hence its affinity for games. You can pass it to someone else, like hot potato, but the count continues until it gets to 0. Then, after it sheds its victim's body, it restarts with a new count and a new victim. I took it to free the kid, he explained. How did you even find out about all this? I saw his mother's post online. So you went looking for paranormal activity? When he didn't deny it, I asked, why? Before he'd met me, his scams had hurt enough people to attract the attentions of a paranormal entity. A demon, he said. A woman who always wore red. The demon tricked him into a deal, but he narrowly managed to escape her. She lurked in his shadow, hoping for a chance to catch him ever since. Doing good deeds makes me less enticing to her, and also gives me practice exercising paranormal influences. As soon as he saw the mother's post, he knew phony experts would come crawling out of the woodwork, making bogus offers, so he contacted her. His plan was simple. After taking the bogey, transfer it to a doll, and then destroy the doll. We agreed he'd stay at a hotel that night so I wouldn't be creeped out by his sleepwalking. Still, I was worried. Prior to this, I'd encountered something similar to the bogey once before, during an incident with my grandmother. It was actually how I met Jack. Granted, I'd never actually seen a ghost or spirit or bogey myself, but I'd done a lot of research back when my grandmother's behavior was similarly strange. I delved into that same sort of research now and learned that convincing the bogey to leave would be difficult, for the same reason you wouldn't easily convince a dog to let go of a flesh and blood rabbit in favor of a toy. His flesh was simply more interesting than a doll. I eventually found a transubstantiation, transmigration, and transference specialist willing to remove the bogey. The ritual would require a sample of his skin and hair to be attached to the doll to make it more lifelike. I set an appointment for 10 a.m. at a shop called Third Eye Psychic and Tarot. The next day, I asked him to meet me at the little shop with its eye design painted in the center of a palm. Since we both arrived early, we took a stroll along the waterfront, and he told me how overnight he'd shackled himself to the bed to deal with the bogey's antics, only to be woken in the morning by the scandalized hotel maid who found him handcuffed in his boxers. Suddenly, his hand ripped out of mine. He scrambled backwards until he couldn't retreat anymore, slamming against the metal railing, an expression on his face I'd never seen before. Sheer, feral, absolute terror. "What?" I began. He leapt over the railing, a dangerous plunge of at least 2 stories, down to the waterfront's lower level. A woman stood up ahead, her crimson gown fluttering around her like ribbons of fire. She gave me a sultry wink, and the hairs on my arms prickled as she lunged over the edge after him, her shadow moving first, a fraction of a second before her bronze legs swung over the side. I rushed to the railing, but didn't dare fling myself down to the concrete below. I had no idea how he'd made such an impossible drop. I quickly hurried to a staircase and dashed down to the lower level, to the walkway at the water's edge. By the time I caught up, he was on his knees, his mouth motoring. No, stop! We don't have a contract." "Oh, but Jackie boy, I do have a contract," purred the woman in red. "What contract? What are you—" She tipped a finger under his chin to tilt his face toward me. "Emma?" And then his eyes widened in horror, mirroring the horror dawning on my own face, as I realized who I'd apparently hired to remove the bogey. And he was screaming at me. "Emma, what'd you do?" I thought she was a paranormal specialist. She said she just needs your skin, Jack." She chuckled. "No," he screamed. "No, I didn't agree. Let her feel the deal, not mine. Take hers." The lady in red tossed her head and burst into delighted laughter. "Now you see his true colors. Still nothing but a groveling worm, eh, Jackie boy?" She stroked his cheek. "Just a parasite to scrape off the world." "Oh, fuck off," he snarled. And then the sky suddenly darkened, as if dusk had fallen. Shadows blotted out the sun. I couldn't see them anymore, just the red of her dress like an inferno, and the shadows swirling like smoke, and Jack was screaming. Oh God, was she taking his skin right then? Ripping it off him? Screaming, and then the darkness and the screams and red were all gone, and I stood there by the water shattered, alone. Lady Blood 2024, contract fulfilled. Attached to the message was a blurry video. Gradually it zoomed out so that I could see the burlap face of a doll, a sort of scarecrow, stained red and shiny, wet where it was stitched with skin, light brown skin that I knew all too well from how often it had lain close to mine, and black hair hanging in curls over its button eyes. The mouth was only a gash in the bogey doll's face, and it leaned in close so I could see only the buttons as it counted.
17, 16.
Its face swayed side to side in excitement.
3, 2, 1.
The screen went black. A child's scream rang out from the phone, thin and reedy, as the doll burst into crimson flames. In moments, it dwindled to ash. It seemed so foolish in retrospect, my believing all Jack's claims about being reformed. He told me he loved me. He told me he was trying to be better. But how could I have forgotten that he was a grifter, a liar, an accomplished catfisher? Of course, he was always telling me what I wanted to hear. He hadn't fooled his demon, though. She'd stripped away all his pretensions when she cornered him. I was still reeling from how quickly he'd betrayed me. I cried myself raw, but I also cried because I brought a terrible fate on him. When I arrived home, I found a photograph on my desk. It was me, on top of the tower. On the back was a note. Good luck getting into grad school, and remember never to let the rules stop you from climbing to those highest heights. Wishing you the best, and sorry I was such a disappointment. Love, Jack. My heart pounded when I read it. Had he written it before or after the bogey was destroyed? Was he alive? I tried calling, but no answer, nor could I reach him on social media. Finally, I got through on a burner phone. Hello? Thank God! I burst on hearing his voice. Are you okay? Silence. Are you there? When he didn't answer, I said quickly, You owe it to me to talk face to face. We met the next day at the airport, where he flew in from wherever he'd disappeared. He looked like absolute hell. Eyes red and lined with dark circles, and clothes rumpled like he'd gone on a bender and was only now crawling toward consciousness. Nevertheless, he was alive and intact, and I flung my arms around him. He grunted in pain. I asked if we could talk somewhere private, and he walked with me to an empty part of the terminal, and we sat in the generic airport seats, facing the large window glass, looking out at the flat sky and tarmac. I spoke first. Why did you disappear? Your deal didn't give her more than a chunk of skin, but she'll come for the rest of me eventually. I left because that's the only way to keep you safe. Actually, I had a whole speech ready for you, but he dropped his face in his hands. A better speech would be after I go to a bait and tackle shop, get a can of worms and pull one out to give to you. Tell you if you're going to save a groveling worm, save that one, because at least it didn't sell you out. Jack, Emma, you could waste your whole life trying to fix the broken men you date. Your life is worth so much more. Go and live it. But when he got up, I caught his arm. Because what if I was reading this whole situation wrong? The lady had tricked me into our bargain knowing he would panic. What if our current conversation was her intention? Was she playing us both? After all, he and I were good together. Hell, better than good. By myself, I was always the anchor stuck in the mud. He was the guy who encouraged me to pull that anchor up and sail into storms, who believed in my ability to climb the tallest tower even when I didn't believe in myself. And I made him better too. Being in my orbit drew him into alignment with my path as an upstanding citizen. Our story was like if the class clown and valedictorian met and fell in love. He taught me to cross lines. I taught him how to stay inside them. I made plans aimed at the future, while he reminded me that where we live is the present. And if I were the demon hunting him, wouldn't I want to arrange a fall from grace before he got too far in his redemption? Wait, I squeezed his arm. When his dark eyes met mine, it was like every other time he'd looked at me, like I was the star that made his world bright. But he disengaged his wrist from my grip. I'm sorry for making that bargain with her, I said, voice cracking. I'm really sorry. It's all right. You probably saved my life. Kinda wish you hadn't. The counting bogey didn't seem a bad way to go. He gave a small smile. You know what scares me, babe? It isn't death. It's pain. I'm really scared of all that pain. That's what she feeds on. That's what's waiting for me. He paused, and a look of self-loathing crossed his face. And I'm sorry that when she cornered me, He shook his head. Anyway, sorry. That's why I can't stay. Goodbye. He disappeared into the terminal. It haunted me. That sad smile of his. That's what's waiting for me. Should I have let him go? Should I have fought harder to make him stay? But I'm certain he wouldn't have, because the next time I tried to contact him, his number changed. Like any good grifter, he all too easily disappeared, leaving no trace. As long as the demon is after him, I'm certain he won't let me near. And that's fine. Just fine. Because I'm going to destroy her. Maybe he's right that I need to stop trying to save my exes from their demons. But his being so literal means it's something I can defeat, especially since I have no sins for her to feed on. And as my flawless test scores and boxes of academic awards show, I am really, really good at problem solving. If there is a way to take down a demon written in some obscure occult library anywhere in the world, I will find it. So watch out, lady. One day soon, I'm coming for you.